Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Althing Considered, the show produced by the Troth, where we sit with really interesting people and talk about really interesting things in the heathen community. Tonight's topic is going to be love and marriage in Norse paganism. I'm not going to sing the whole song, but I'm sure you guys, if this might be dating me a little bit, but maybe some of you guys remember the theme to Married with Children. That's what always pops in my head whenever I see those two things together. My name is Ben Kowalski-Grayheck. I'm here with our PR director, Piper Perry. And we have a special guest tonight, which is the Reverend Maire Durkan.
Hi.
Now, you might know her from some of the bloats that we put on. Very graciously invited us into her home to provide some of these wonderful ceremonies to you guys. Now we actually get a chance to sit down and talk with her about one of her favorite topics, least favorite topics, most favorite topics, but a very common topic that comes up in the heathen community about relationships, love, marriage, and how all these things interplay together. So that is actually tonight's topic. So love and marriage. So I'm going to be asking a couple questions here. So firstly, Maire, could you explain to us how it is that heathens, Ásatrú, Norse pagans, how is it that we connect these kinds of relationships in our lives?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I mean, we can talk about the lore first a little bit. I mean, I've been married 40 years to the same individual, and obviously we've all changed over that time. And I think that that's part of it that we need to evolve. But if we talk in terms of the lore in particular, I think we have to look at Frigg and say, okay, well, her very name, Priya, in Proto-Indo-European means beloved. She has a very long relationship with Odin, right? And in fact, in Volupsa, the seeress calls her Odin is her angan, her sweet scent. So we have this sense of a relationship when we look at them that she calls him, and it's an interesting thing to call a warrior, someone we think of as a warrior, though he has many praise names that and many aspects. His sweet scent. And back then, sweet scent, you know, when those words went in, that was a very important thing to have sweet scents in your life. So you realize that they have been together and they share the high seat together. There's an equity between them. And I mean that really almost in the terms that we use it today. There's equity between them, that they share, that they're on the same level. One is not putting themselves before the other. There's a sense, and that's a really important thing in our relationships as heathens, as people in a relationship, right? We need all of us to have equity. We need to have that sense of respect, that we have common goals, that we're supporting, encouraging each other. And we are also letting each other find, and we're supporting each other's personal growth. And you see this very much if you just look at the lore. When Odin is going off in Vafthrûfnismal, he's talking to her about wanting to go see Vafthrûfnir. She doesn't think that's a very great idea, that being the giant. And she's like, well, you know, okay, I'm not so sure about this, but safely go and safely return. In other words, I trust you to do what's right for you. And I trust you to come back. And I think that's another thing. It's the trust. It's the allowing for people to do the things that they're passionate about. And for Odin, it's wisdom. It's his curiosity. And for Frigg, it's, you know, she has this whole purview of goddesses, of manifestations that she's very, and Odin is perfectly fine with that. Of course, they contend with each other. And that too is part of it. And that's where I see Frigg. Okay, they hoodwink each other. They do some stuff when you look at the lore in different places, but at the same time, like with the Langobards, right, is one example. Yeah, did you want to throw something in, Piper?
No, I love the Langobard story though.
Because it's the women,
cool.
The women again hoodwinking.
Yes,
it's sort of great. So there is this sense, and it's great, and the humor. Okay, so I think they both got the humor. So I see humor, equity, having common goals, right? That again, Frigg and Odin are very good at showing us that we have a couple that has common goals, while supporting and encouraging the personal growth of each of the individuals in that union. And so I see that all as things we can look to for sure, as important parts of a relationship, and letting each other evolve. And Odin and Frigg have evolved. They have, and they are in the time and place that we are, and so they must meet the thought forms and the reality of each place in which they are having to manifest stuff. So I think all of that's important in terms of a relationship, and we can see it in the lore. I'm going to turn this, let Piper talk a little bit for a while, so it's not just all me talking.
I actually did have a question based off the for Piper.
Yes.
Just to so in some ways, I think these stories of divine marriage, I always get a little caught up in it and get kind of lost in my own head when I think about, well, this is an eternal marriage. There's no time to it. Like if these beings are eternal, they stay outside time. This marriage is thus eternal. Sort of reminds me of that scene in Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry and his wife are going to renew their vows, and she says, "I will love you till death and then after." And Larry just kind of goes, "Well, I thought, till death." But then after, I would. It's this notion of the marriage, and what I love about your interpretation, Mara, is like it is constantly reinterpreted, and we read more into it as we evolve, as we change, as we experience our own relationships. We read that relationship differently. So Piper, I wanted to ask you, some of these relationships that we see in the lore are mostly heteronormative relationships when you look in the lore. But we also know that there are many queer relationships within heathenry. If we look at this as being a text that we can read ourselves into, queer folks in heathenry reading themselves into the lore, how is that dynamic at work? And how are these stories reinterpreted?
I think it depends on the person that's reading the stories, to be clear. But I know that for myself, who has I have a wife, because I talk about her all the time. And the same sorts of, Odin and Frigg having this equitable relationship where they let each other go far enough where they can learn stuff, but stay close enough so that they're still in relationship. Those are all things that, at least in my experience, queer people hang on to, right? Even though it doesn't look necessarily, that is what we're striving for. That's what the goal is. That is to live with someone else through all the changes and ages, and try to build a good, happy, and also hooked to a community relationship, right? So that you can mentor young people that are having issues. You can you can hold other people's children. You can do all of those things that is still seen amongst many heathens as being heteronormative as a queer heathen. And there are a lot of us, and that's awesome in the Troth.
Yeah, and there's a lot of queer heathens who are parents and who are parenting, their children, and that too is still part of the equation of the relationship, that larger relationship, the couple plus whatever the extended family is for any of us.
Right.
I also wanted to ask about one of the topics that comes up. So I keep my ear to the ground in heathenry. I keep my ear to the Reddit. And one of the most common topics that comes up is usually some kind of romantic interest, love lost. I want to know if this person loves me. What do I do? How do I fix this? How do I do that? How have you guys, if people have come to you seeking your sage advice in the realm of relationships and love and marriage, what problems do you typically see? And you don't have to get into any specifics. A lot of this is probably confidential, but what problems do you commonly see, and what are your common recommendations for people who, let's say, go through a heartbreak?
Well, I'll talk to that a little bit first. I think one of the first things we have to do, if again, I am not a psychologist. I am going to counsel from a spiritual perspective. We call it guerrilla counseling within the clergy community. If you are don't have your PhD or your master's in psychology, even though we get I have a little bit of psychology, like many of us, but I think the first thing, if someone comes to you, is to really sit down and let them unpack and hold space for them, because they're grieving. Even if it's been a bad break, and a couple has come and they're and that was your question about if they've come apart, if the relationship is unraveled, my job is to, first of all, hold space and listen, and be aware of what needs to be heard and what needs to be grieved, because we can't go on until we sort of look at the 500-pound gorilla in the room and figure out what is hurting most and why it's hurting. And then we need to look at the relationship and sort of figure out, from my perspective, whether we need some counseling, whether we need a therapist in on this who is, a professional counselor. And then you have to ask questions. And that's one of the jobs, I think, of any good counselor, at least for you have to say, do you believe in weird or destiny if they're heathen, right? Do you believe there's one person or certain people that you're meant to be with? How do you know when you love someone? That would be a big question for me. I always start from a place of holding space and then curiosity, because what they're going to say about how do you know when you love somebody is very important, because that can tell a whole lot about what someone needs, or maybe it can tell a little bit about what they need to address. We need to not be in a codependent relationship. We always need boundaries. And very many of us think that somehow unconditional love means we lose ourselves in someone, and that's awful. We don't want to hear that. We need boundaries. I can love you and I can still have my boundaries. I can love you no matter what, but if you talk to me in a certain way, I need to say that's my boundary. I need to pull back right now because you're not speaking to me from a place of respect. Or, as I've said, financially, you can say, I love you no matter what, but I simply can't afford to support you anymore. A lot of things revolve around finances when couples break up, sadly. That can be the crux. It may not be the ultimate reason. I think marriages sometimes are not episodic breaks. There are lots of little paper cuts and people bleed out from lots of little slights and overlooks. So I would be asking someone, how do you know when you love somebody? What does that mean to you? Do you feel comfortable asking the person you love, your partner, like what made them fall in love with you? What made you fall in love with them? Let's go back to the beginning and let's take a look at that. Those would be some questions I would ask and give them space to think about it. And that probably isn't going to be one discussion, but many.
I agree, actually, to all of that. And then there is sort of an extra layer of question that I would ask after this person tells me the story of love, right? The story of love that they felt for this person. What changed? Did you change? Did they change? And one of the major breakages that actually happens in queer relationships, at least in my community, is when someone transitions. If I can create a space where they can sit down and talk about what that transition means and what they can do with it, and sometimes that conversation turns into they can't stay together, right? They love each other dearly, but that transition is just not something they can get over, right? So then we talk about, okay, so how can you, instead of like just cutting this person out of your life whatsoever, can you transition that relationship into co-parenting? Can you transition that relationship into friendship? Can you transition that relationship into something else, right? That goes along with your personal transition. And then there is the extra societal layer of, are you breaking up with this person because this person is in the closet, right? Or are because they are afraid? Okay, so why are they afraid? Do you understand why they're afraid? Those sorts of things. And I also have a list of pagan-friendly counselors because I'm also not a psychologist. This is very much guerrilla counseling. And also a lot of queer people don't have a lot of money. So, I am a stop on hopefully and what I tend to do under those circumstances is refer them to people like Maire, right? Refer them to people like Reverend Tim, refer them to people like, that have a little bit more distance, because a lot of queer relationships break up because of opposing trauma, right? You have pain points that rub against each other and they just can't keep it together for whatever reason. Nobody's wrong, nobody's bad. It's just their particular life experience doesn't meet the other person, right? And if they can stay in a relationship, sometimes those relationships can come back to love, right? They can come back to romantic love or friendship love or whatever, but there needs to be space for that. And that is, as Reverend Maire said, that is a lot of conversations. That's not just one.
Well, I'll give one example recently of a relationship between a queer couple that I'm very good friends with, and I was not counseling them I was listening as their friend. And they had 2 children together. And the one partner had both the children, and they were together over 20 years, right? So this was a long, loving relationship. They got married in Arizona before it was legal in my state of Delaware, because that's how committed they were. But ultimately, people change. Things like, and then you don't know what the background trauma of one person is over another. One person in the relationship dearly, dearly wanted children. It was very important to them to have children, biological children. They did it. Okay. But the other partner, and this is the part that is about communication, and this never happened. What the one partner said is, I loved her so much. I just wanted her to be happy to have this experience. It's not that I don't love these children who came into our lives who I parented, but I never wanted to be a parent. And after 20 years, she said this to the other partner, and that was a neutron bomb of a thing. And they did work it out, and they are friends, and they live in the same house, which is miraculous, but they get along. But there was a lot of heart pain there, not a lot of heart pain for everyone, for the children who are adults. To hear that was, so I mean, these things, when we come upon them, everyone is hurting. Everyone is hurting, and we need to just give people the space to talk, to get through whatever they need to even have the conversations they need to have. And as a clergy person, if they're heathen, I'm going to draw at some point. We're going to do some rituals at some point, and we're going to do some prayer as part of that. But I'm going to turn this back over to Piper. I just wanted to anecdotally give an example of things falling apart.
No, and yeah, that's a really good example, actually. And that is often because, yes, there's an societal expectation that if you are a feminine presenting person, you want to have children. And that's not for everyone. Right? Mm-hmm. Children are a unique people that are a gift for us to care for until they're old enough to care for themselves. And if you don't want to do that work, don't. I mean,
exactly.
Just don't.
Yeah, I can't even imagine holding that in, like subsuming that in your person
20 years.
For 20 years.
So
and then
hard.
And not that the partner who didn't want children didn't love these individuals. That wasn't the case. But they never could voice, I never wanted this. So in other words, her boundary, in a way, she didn't communicate her boundary. And wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. That's a
and it was her, and she was the one who birthed all the children.
She was the birthing parent. And
wow.
So I mean, there is a lot of layers here.
Yeah.
A lot of layers. A lot of layers.
No, that's really that's an incredible story. Speaking of like social expectation. So now to bring all the attention back, I guess where it belongs, is on the young heterosexual male. Kidding. Not what are yeah, just bring it back to young heterosexual men.
Of course, right?
Yeah, of course. But this is I say it jokingly, but in heathenry, it always seems like we do this the social expectation, especially in this these very hyper masculine spaces, is the idea of women and children as like possessions and prizes that you get for being like good man enough, right? Like you're man, you get woman, you get children, and if you do that, you're a successful man.
Score.
Yeah, right. But but in our society today, you have young men who don't get there. I wonder how we address as a religion and push back against this idea that has been part of a strong current in our faith of this hyper masculinity, pushing people to get, make family, get children, have wife, that kind of thing.
Piper,
how do we counter those narratives?
Sure. Okay. So I've met a lot of these heathen people, usually masculine presenting, but not always, who think that they are there to provide, protect, and procreate. This is their only jobs in the world. They don't have to communicate. They don't have to hold. And it's a problem with both sort of societal heteronormativity and societal misogyny. Right? That women are not people, right? So the first thing you kind of have to do, or at least I've had to do in the past, is establish the fact that that as a feminine presenting person, you are actually a person. You have wants and needs and desires and things that you want in the world. And if you can get them to sort of understand that this person that they love is a human, rather than some sort of ornament, that goes a long way. Because if I have someone that I love dearly who comes from that sort of very masculine dude bro sort of thing, and sort of getting him to understand that feminine presenting people are people, that they have thoughts and feelings and desires and goals of their own, it's sometimes really hard, but I am very stubborn. So it's getting better. And he's in a straight passing relationship, anyway. So it's even more important. I think one of the problems with monogamy is it sort of teaches you this is the script and you don't ever have to actually talk to each other. And that is so bad for everyone, especially men, because we don't teach them, or masculine presenting people, we don't teach them to talk to each other, right? The only person they usually have to like share their thoughts and feelings and desires and goals with is that ornament that they won. And so if you can get them in some sort of thought where they think that that's equal and equitable and together, it's like the light goes on. And they often fall out of a lot of those really deeply misogynistic things, or at least they question it more.
I would agree with that, Piper. I think that speaking as a mother of 6 boys, men, they're all men now. One of them's a father himself of a little girl. So I think that there's a couple things that, as a boomer, yes, boomer, I am one. As a boomer generation, even though my mother would have called herself a feminist, and certainly that was where she was coming from. I was still grew up in a household where, you know, it really was, you know, my mother was home, my father was at work, you know, and going forward without being told anything. And Piper, you can probably speak to this. I think we're about the same generation. There are about what, 6 professions as little girls that we could be a teacher.
That was okay. Yes,
a nurse, teacher, secretary.
Librarian. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a very limited number of things to which we could aspire.
Yes.
Like as the song "I'm Gonna Be an Engineer" talks to. So even though we might, you know, have repudiated that, still in our heads, everything in our society as women was telling us what was the most important, what is one of the most important moments of your life. This is still an important moment, right across the boards, whether you're queer or whether you identify as you know, cisgender, straight, or whatever you identify as. We are still in our minds, because we grew up in this society. It's like marriage, down that aisle, the one. These are all things in our heads that are very much part of that. And whether even when we're bucking the patriarchy, male and female, and every non-gender and whatever you're identifying with, it doesn't matter. That has been what we've been steeped in as a culture. So in our heads, in our hearts, it's not even something that's conscious, but it's something that we have. And we really need to stop and look and say, when we're getting into a relationship, and you can say again, like I said, what makes you fall in love with this person? What is attractive beyond sex, which is wonderful stuff, but what beyond sex is making this person the one I want to really be with, or these people, if you're in a polyamorous relationship. I have friends who there's 3 of them. They call them, their 2 are the husbands. They're all
awesome.
But and they have a loving long-term relationship. Okay. But they've chosen this, and they've had to, but I have watched them do some sort of patriarchy sort of guy sort of things over the years, without, you know, not, and sometimes it can be imposed one on the other, just like one being like more macho, and it's something that's in us. So we really need to think, all of us, about how are we falling into these roles in a relationship. I was, you know, I had all these kids at a certain point. I mean, I had the lower paying job. I was the one who dropped back and raised the kids at home and worked in the office part-time while my husband worked full-time. And, you know, those norms, I think over time, my husband and I both have gotten better at going, yeah, you know, you can come home and peel the potatoes. I've been working all day too. And that's another problem. The partner who's home has been undervalued. And often that was the female identifying partner, sadly, has been not valued What are the words that we use? House mouse, that was a common term. What terrible things, we aren't worth anything. You know, the ones who stay home are doing an incredibly important job. And from a heathen perspective, oh boy, let's talk about it. Best way you can honor Frigg is the person who is the homemaker, the homekeeper. That's a big deal. That's a beautiful way to honor her. So yeah, I think we need to shake up our thinking in the first place about what our roles are and what our expectations are in a relationship and going into what we are going to do. Let's say go into long-term partnership or a relationship, a marriage. We really need to rethink, and really open up and say, what are my goals, and what, and then the bigger question, and why are those my goals? What am I going to get? Because that can shake up some trauma too. Like we all have generational trauma. So why do I want that? I'm going to shut up now and let you talk.
You're doing great. You're doing great. And I agree with all of that.
I was just thinking of my own daughter just the other week when you were bringing up marriage and how it's just inculcated. She is marrying all of her toys now to each other. So like her giraffes are getting married to her tigers. Like she asks all the time, you know, are you married to Mama? Yes, I am. Mama married to you? Yes, she is. And you know, she asks about what it is. She, you know, I don't think she doesn't quite get it right. But I realize that what I tell her is going to kind of and what I show her is going to be what sets the mind in motion for what she makes of this, you know, social, religious, cultural institution that we call marriage, and what she thinks it does and what she thinks it is. So that kind of responsibility dawned on me the other day when she's marrying her animals together. And I'm like, oh, okay. She's starting to dip in to this cultural institution, trying to figure it out. So I'm not going to say that it's like it's inborn in every little girl that they just understand marriage. No. It's very much like she's seen me and my wife are married. She's seen her grandparents are married. She's wondering how this thing works. It's not like it's not an inborn thing, guys. It's just a child trying to figure things out. And what I tell her is going to matter. And hey, maybe someday the stories that I tell her about where marriage comes from, what was the first marriage, might end up becoming these legends that we now tell each other about Odin and Frigg.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure, absolutely.
So how do we found new? So we have the lore as it exists. Where are our new stories? So and the lore, like I think people are reinterpreting it in some ways, repurposing it, re-experiencing it in a way that makes sense today. This is not something that we should say, oh, you can't do that. You have to read it exactly the way the ancients would have read it. I'm just going to tell you right now, that's impossible. I'm looking at you, TikTok.
I agree.
I agree.
It's impossible. We are always going to be seeing it through a modern lens. And if you think you can read it as an ancient, you're actually inventing an ancient personality in your mind and then trying to think what that person would read it as. Just saying. It's a wild ride. But we are reinterpreting myths today to figure out our current circumstances. What new myths, new stories, new ways of interpreting myth have you seen that are particularly helpful in helping people understand things like queer issues, things like modern marriage issues that come up that may not have been present in the actual in the literal text itself?
Piper, you start.
I think as modern Western people, we have a different idea of marriage than our ancestors anyway, because a lot of our ancestors were married to one another. They may have met the person a couple times, but you know, this was somebody had a farm and somebody else had a farm, and you put the two farms together, right? And that was still happening with
matchmaking in the old days was really just like two old men meeting at a party and talking about their kids.
Right. And actually my grandmother got married, her first husband was that sort of relationship, right? They were both from the same village. They were both around the same age, so they just married them, right? So we actually put a lot of emphasis nowadays on romantic love, right? There has to be the spark, the chemistry, there's something that attracts you to that other person. And I can say that changes with time, actually, because what you find attractive in your 20s can be totally different than what you find attractive in your 50s. or 40s or 30s, or
a clean sink, let me tell you. No dishes in that sink. Yeah, I'm seeing you guys raising your eyebrows there.
Yeah
Totally.
I get it. And he even cleaned the sink after he was done.
Yay, that's awesome. Yeah, good job.
The hairs on the back of my neck standing up.
And romantic love gives us some extra ways to connect to people, and it also gives us some extra burdens, because that's when we get into the sort of twin flame. There's only one other person in the world for me. I have to find my soulmate, or I will just die. That's all sort of a romantic love construct. So part of that is being practical. Can you communicate with this person, right? Beyond the sex. And I'm not going to lie, the Disney chemicals are fabulous. And also, do I want to talk to you in the morning, right?
Yep.
Do I want to make food for you the next day, right? That is some of the most important things about building a relationship, right? Whether that relationship is marriage or your best friend or your metamors, if you're polyamorous, and these are people that are, sort of out there on the edges of your awareness, and you kind of want to be friends with them, so that makes things smoother. But, you're not really interested in them in that way. But it's the idea of building relationships. Metamor. Yeah, it's usually the partner of someone you're dating, right? Yeah. So.
I'd never heard that term before. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's a relatively common term in polyam circles. But anyway, it's what do you have in common? And one of the things about romantic love that we've been taught, especially in media and stories, and the stories we tell each other about what love is supposed to be, is it doesn't matter if you have similar goals, if you have similar values, if you have similar interests. You just meet this person and you fall in love, and it lasts forever, right? And and that hurts people in a way, because they think of themselves such failures. They have failed as a human being because they cannot keep this person that they think is the end all be all of their existence at 19 years old, right? It's like, right. No, honey. No, wait. It's really not like that.
And it's hard. It just because I still remember being in that age as well, and like it's such those kind of young love moments. They're so they etch themselves in your memory so much because it's such a transitional period in your life. And I wonder if it's not somewhat like adulthood is kind of scary, right? Mm-hmm. Adulthood is kind of scary to a kid, and as you're moving into adulthood, it's like, oh, there's this other person who's going to be moving into adulthood with me, and oh, there's this thing we can do together now whenever we want when we're adults. Like, when we're right. Adults and have our own place, we could do this all the time. Our lives are just gonna be great. Adulthood is not scary at all. It's actually something we want. And then so when those relationships kind of end or transform in a way where they actually become like real adult relationships, let's be real, it leaves a mark. It leaves a pretty big mark on somebody. And it's one of those things that a combined soup of different kinds of circumstances really etches those. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
Yeah, I do. Anyway,
I think that I'm going to just talk a little bit about not bad mouthing my husband Pat at all, but we had 9 kids together. We were in it together. But
right.
I met Pat when I was 24. He was 26 just about, and we were pretty young. Actually, I was younger than 24. I was 23. Yeah, I was young. Shoot, yeah, I was just turned 23. Pat was like 24 going on 25. By the time I was 26, I was a mama and we were married. I went into labor on our first anniversary with our first daughter, Ellen, who's an outstanding human being. But, I had 9 kids with this man, and I can tell you, we have been through some stuff. And the thing that, if you were going to say, what would I tell a couple just starting out? Of course, I mean, yeah, when you first are in love, I mean, you would go anywhere in the world with that person. I mean, when you're that in love, it's very different in your 20s. Or even if you fell in love in your 50s or your 60s, that in love phase, I think even for an older person, it's astonishing. I think that's why some people are so in love with just being in love. But we get, life happens, and we have babies, and everyone's got to support this child, and we're suddenly sleep deprived, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to make the ends meet, and how we're going to pay that doctor bill, or the co-pays or whatever. And then things happen. They're teenagers, and more happens, and you still, in the midst of all this, you must find time for each other. You must find time to talk, and you must find time to make yourselves the center of everything. Because if you and your partner or partners, particularly if there are young people involved in your relationship, and even if they're not, if you and your partner do not find time to come together and talk, and you get into a groove, a habitual groove, if you go off to work, they go to do their thing, which is great, and you go to do your thing, which is great, but you never come together. Let's go take a walk. Let's go just have a meal. You have to find times of togetherness, and you have to do it consistently. It's not the big moments that make a relationship. It's the many, 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 many countless small ones. And as I said earlier, it's usually not the one episodic cheating episode or whatever that ends a marriage or a relationship. It's the little paper cuts over and over and over again that bleed a relationship out. When you're not paying attention, when you're not listening, when you're not holding space for that other person, when they're making some noise you hate, and you're like, ah. And you're like, okay, I gotta recapture whatever it is, because if he makes that noise one more time, I'm gonna lose it. Yeah, and you gotta find a way to. Yeah, go ahead.
You wake up from a restless night of sleep, and you see your wife sitting over you with a pillow, going you just won't stop snoring.
It's time for a CPAP.
You can see she's
we
just
do
fighting
that.
with
I do
herself.
that.
She's like, it would be so easy just.
Let's talk CPAPs now.
Yes.
Yeah, when CPAPs enter into the relationship,
so sexy.
So
sexy.
There's so many just Darth Vaders now.
But you have to. You're right.
Who knew this would be the future?
Yeah.
But it is. It's like you have to work through those small things, and you have to make time for each other. It's so. I cannot say. I mean, we still have an 18-year-old, right? We're like Medicare, and we have an 18-year-old going to college. So I mean, that's our youngest. So and she keeps. We adore her, and she keeps us young. And boy, I wouldn't be on this right now if it wasn't for her. But we have to find that time for each other, because ultimately, our bodies change, our interests change. What originally sparked everything might have totally changed. So we need to reinvent, like the gods are reinventing, as I feel like their relationships ebb and flow. We need to realize sometimes we're going to be closer and sometimes farther apart, but we've always got to make time and we always got to communicate.
And we actually have an example in our lore. Just thinking of it now, we actually have an example in our lore about a relationship between the gods that didn't work out, which is Njord and Skadi.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it comes down to like he didn't want to leave the beach and she didn't like the sound of seagulls.
Yeah, and they might have had banging sex, but that wasn't enough to keep it together. He had great feet, we know that.
Yeah.
Man, Piper,
Foot
what is every time I bring up Njord, gotta bring up Finn's feet.
It's Nord's feet, man. They're just
Look,
wow. Yeah.
I've gone into the Njord feet lore of like why I think he probably has nice feet and why the people who heard that story would have known he had nice feet. But
pedicure, it's in the ocean all the time.
It's the easy lifestyle he's got, and he's the guy. He's a man. He's a god of luxury, and just chilling and
hanging out on
just
the beach.
Hanging on the beach, fishing, and just having a good time. And I don't know. Again, this is one of those things in my mind. I'm like, I don't know why more people don't worship Njord. You know, I think of people like worshiping Odin, being like, I'm gonna go to Valhalla, and you know, it's like Greg from accounting shows up in Valhalla when he could be showing up in Njord's hall of money and good times. Like,
and
why?
Beach. Yeah.
Why not there? Why not Njord, guys? Why not Njord? Reject Odin, embrace Njord. That's
But yeah, there you have from the beginning. What did she want? She went into that relationship really wanting Balder. We think, right? She had this. She had her ultimate man in her head, and she figured he was the best looking guy. He had to have the best feet.
Yeah. And the person. Go ahead.
No, you go, girlfriend.
The person she ends up with is the person that shares her values. She ends up with Uller in the mountains with snow, hunting things, right? So she ends up with the person that is probably the best match for her, right? Because this is a person that shares the life she wants to live.
Yeah,
you want to sit around on the beach.
Njord ends up with the person who's right for him. Beaches and money.
Beaches and
Life
money.
ain't nothing but beaches and money for Njord. But that is an example of like a relationship that just kind of ends, and there's no real acrimony. It seems it's just kind of like, well, this isn't going to work. So
no, in fact, in the Locusena, when they're talking about the breakup of the relationship, I mean, Skadi is still referred to as Frey and Freya's stepmother, right? And it's okay, right? Everyone's cool with it.
And she still is defensive of them, you know.
Yes.
She's, in fact, passionately so. Like, like let's hang that snake. But I think another really important question that we always have to ask, and I have young people now in relationships. I mean, I've got people pushing 40. I've got people in their 30s. I've still got some in their late 20s. And I got then my baby, not even 20 yet. But one of the things I've noticed is that even when I watch my kid's heart broken in a relationship that didn't, and in this case, very lovingly, but very sadly, the two of them parted. It wasn't working out. Is then the hesitancy, and a big question for all of us particularly if we've been through a divorce or we've been through a bad breakup, is love something that scares me? Is love, now that I know that love is more than, so this is love, la 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 la, you know, Cinderella stuff. Is it something that scares me? And why does it scare me? That's a hard one, but it's one we really have to look at. And in a relationship, even in a married relationship, if we're coming away from that person, why am I so scared of a connection right now? What is scaring me? What is keeping me from reaching out and getting this more where it should be for both of us? But someone's got to talk. Someone's
Right.
got to make that move.
Right. It's actually my experience is some of that, but it's a lot of people jump into new relationships too soon when they haven't really looked at what went wrong, right? Because they're so hurt, they're so sad, they're so lonely that, you know,
Right.
they go pick someone else up, and they're making the same when you watch someone with a series of relationships and they're all with the same sort of person that's doing the same sort of thing to them, that's what really indicates to me that, okay, you haven't learned from that.
Right. You're just repeating.
You're just repeating. So let's sit down and actually, take a look at what's going on for you and see where we can make that, where you can choose better partners for yourself, right? Because that ends up, you're choosing bad partners and more pain, and usually, often there are kiddos involved, and this is something that we can learn from, and it's not scary to be alone, and it's not scary to fall in love either, right?
I think there's a lot of fear when one has been through a relationship,
Yep.
particularly if you've been in it for a while and you come out. You're right. One of two things. You either immediately snatch someone up or you stay back because you're so afraid of being hurt again, that you're afraid to open your heart.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, when we as clergy are counseling, I actually love doing like premarital or pre-relationship, hand fasting counseling, because I know that these people have already set their goal. We're going to do this thing, right? And sometimes at this point, investments have been made. Not that different from back in the Middle Ages. Investments of money, we've gotten the hall, blah, 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 blah. This all has to be done in advance. So things have happened, but we still got to stop and ask, what made you fall in love, and open in a way that they don't feel threatened. But at the same time, what made you fall in love? And then ask some hard questions. If X, Y, or Z happened, how would you handle it?
Yeah.
If finances, suddenly someone lost a job, how will you handle it? You have to ask, because you're pre-gaming a relationship. I mean, no one really did that, even though we did it back in the day. I did it with someone back in the long ago days. I think it's really important because if people you can't make reality out of that, but at least it opens the door to them asking those questions and having that discussion with each other.
Yep. A question I ask now, because of my own disabledness, is when I'm having those conversations with people that want to get handfasted. And let me point out, I am not Troth clergy. However, I have been doing this for a very long time. Is what happens if your partner becomes disabled? How do you guys work with that? How do you feel about that? How does that affect? Because frankly, most of us are going to be, and that we're going to age into that. So if you're looking at someone that's looking at a long-term relationship, and a lot of queer people, in my experience, are neurodiverse and often have some disability of some kind. So they're already walking into that relationship knowing that they need to have a conversation about this particular life reality, right? Reality of that particular life. And you get some really interesting answers, actually, from people. It's like, yeah, I'm fine with ADHD, but I'm not okay with, cerebral palsy. It's like, well, okay, then perhaps, let's talk about that. Let's see where that goes with that. But yeah, that's something new I ask in the last 5 years or so, because it certainly affects relationships. And it has certainly affected my relationships, both friends and romantic.
And these things don't just to maybe frighten the audience a little more. Is that these things don't necessarily all happen just one by one. Like, oh, we had a disability, and then that was over. But then this happened, then we got through this, and then this happened, then we got through this. Sometimes these are cascading effects. So, say someone goes into chronic illness, which then leads to lots of doctor bills, which then leads to a lot of financial stress, which then you have a kid and then you're sleep deprived and then you don't perform well at work and then someone loses their job and then the doctor bills are still coming in. You see where a lot of these things, these really big problems. And so it's very important. I'm very glad you guys do this pre-counseling stuff. I also think it's important to say, like, these things aren't just going to come at you one at a time. Right? It's not like Bruce Lee enemy where everyone just goes, okay, let's fight him one-on-one, right? Oh, I'm gonna go at him, then you're gonna go at him. Like, no, they're just they like other like it makes sense in life. Many of these things come at you in all different ways, and some of them lead into other ones. So just to terrify our audience who might not have got married yet, not yes, these problems are overcomable, or maybe not overcomable, but like the relationships can weather this, but they're not. It's not just going to be, well, I weathered this, and now there's this, and now we got to weather this. It's multiple storms happening all at once, all the time. And how? So let's say this. Let's say that you have this storm of stuff happening. How do you counsel young people or any people in any relationship at any phase in their lives? How do they look to get through it with that partner?
Okay, I'll talk a little bit. I think this usually happens somewhere, at least with some of the people I've counseled, in the teen years. Things happen, really, really awful things. Sometimes, like kids got anorexia, and another one, a whole family is traumatized. By it's not just that person. Everything is a ripple effect. It's where love is laid, the ripples go out. Everyone in the family and in the friend group that's close to them is touched by that. So you've got a child, let's say, in hospital with anorexia or bulimia, or it doesn't matter. Already the bandwidth of the people you're counseling is this small. There's only so much they can take in because they're in crisis mode. And when our minds are in crisis mode, our brain chemistry changes. So we need to the first thing I do in those situations, because if there are other people involved or other children involved, obviously the whole family should be in with a therapist and family counseling. They need to be. They need the support of that extra person. They need to build their village. They need their support structures, because we're not islands. We can't do this alone. And believe me, I can tell you that whole family is being affected, because one person, or if dad is sick or got someone in the hospital, everyone in that family, particularly a teen or their security, their sense of security, even if they're rebellious, if home is the secure place for them, the safe place, suddenly home isn't even safe anymore because the stuff is going on. People get short, they project onto others. So my first question is, how are you doing? How are you taking care of you? What are you doing to take care of yourself? Because we get back to the idea of the airplane and the oxygen. And that's where we talk about Maslow's pyramid of need, right? We're going to go up the structure. If the home is safe, how about you? Where's your head? Can you do something to care for yourself, to breathe? Because if you are feeling like you are the keystone in the middle of this structure and the whole thing's crumbling, you need to start to just take some space for yourself. You have to find a little bit of space for yourself in the midst of this storm, even if it is small. I had one of my people say to me, gee, and this was with a kid. She said, I felt like, you feel like you're just walking in a meadow and everything's fine. And suddenly a tornado just takes you and throws you. And you're like, suddenly you're, on your back halfway across in a bunch of rubble. And you're like, what the hell happened? That's what it's like when you're in a trauma. And I think as a counselor, we got to just literally listen to where are you in your head and what can you do to even begin to give yourself some space. Have to get self-care in there. Step one. Definitely.
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly, because you really need to be able to pull it together for yourself and have some sort of rest before you can help anyone else.
And it's important as the counselor in that situation, and particularly with a relationship where things are falling apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the family or the relationship. That it starts with us. We have to put ourselves, we have to take some space because our bandwidth is so limited in a crisis. And Ben, you talk to it, but so everyone here knows, and I'm sure everyone listening has been there. All of a sudden, before we had this bandwidth, we could focus on many things. When a crisis happens, or you hit, as you say, with a cascade of them, our bandwidth becomes very small. And we also have trauma brain. It's looping a certain way. There's certain things your body's. We've also got stress. We have gone from the living room to the emergency room. We've got catecholamines and cortisol coursing through our body. Our brains are not functioning. So the first thing I would say as a clergy counselor to anyone in that situation is please, 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 I know it feels impossible. If you can take 5 minutes and just breathe deeply and ground yourself and tell yourself that you're loved and tell yourself that and here's the clergy part of that. You're not alone. There's goddesses out there. There's gods out there. I mean, we got Lean coming in. We can have seen for boundaries. Frigg is there. Ask for that protection. Ask your ancestors. Ask. This is my job as your clergy. I'm assuming I'm going to be talking to someone who's on that wavelength and say, you're not alone. You're really not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in terms of, so I know we had wanted to speak to one goddess. So speaking of the goddesses, wanted to speak to one in particular. You had mentioned this, Maire, was Lofn was one, and her particular role and how that role has been in the lore, but also how that role has expanded, changed, and for you, how do you talk about Lofn in even in these situations? That we bring up in crisis situations or in counseling situations, like how does Lofn go into how do you conceive of this, and how do you interpret the mythology on that?
Okay, well, we I don't want to go into a big thing on Lofn right now because you can look it up anywhere. If you just she's an easy story. Go to Gylfaginning. I think it's 34, and I think she is in line 8 if I recall correctly. And she is listed as being so mild and so kind that and benevolent, she'll pray to that she will receive permission from the All-Father and Frigg to bring together men and women whose marriages were previously forbidden. I should point out the verb lova means to allow or permit. The verb or I guess it's I don't know, I guess it could be a verb. Lof, L-O-F means praise, and a lov songer is a song of praise. So there's this aspect of joy in her, a beautiful joy. And I think what I would say today, I see her as by the way, in the lore, very specifically, if anyone gets all goofy about this, though I don't talk to those kind of people very often, but the text doesn't specify that women join with women but men vice versa. It's very open. And so, and she is very much the person who would come into a situation where permission was not being granted and being there. I would also call on Lean to come in and give refuge. In a situation where in a marriage someone was specifically in a crisis, where they and their partner aren't apart, but they're weathering a terrible storm, and they might be each on their own wavelength of very big trauma going through this storm. First of all, I would tell them that Lofn, if I'm going to say it the technically correct way, non-American way, the goddess, remember, who is about also self-love. We have to have unconditional love. It says about unconditional love, love with boundaries, though, as I said, having that boundary that says, I love you no matter what. And this for my partner as well. I love you no matter what. But if you're so angry, and I know you're upset, and I know you're going through a lot, I am too. But if you're going to snap at me that way, I need to tell you that that's not cool, that I love you, but we need to do better with each other, you know? So that we bring that in, that unconditional love into the relationship with the boundary. We do not want to be in a toxic relationship, nor should we ever permit ourselves to be in a toxic relationship. And part of love, and though, as I said, that unconditional love, and I did a actual meditation on this at the virtual Troth moot, is to find that space to go to her and say, open my heart to myself, open my heart to my shadows so that I may embrace them and let them go if I can. And open my heart to my shining self, to all that is good in me that I am just not paying attention to, that I am talking down. And help me to love myself. Because honestly, we cannot ever love another person fully to our full potential until we start that process. And we are taught as people in this society to not love ourselves. I'm not talking about narcissism. I'm talking about just, you know, this is my soul. My soul is here in this world manifesting, you know, I'm doing a pretty good job on XYZ. I'm worthy. I am loved. I am worth it. I am worth my breath. I am worth the people, you know. This is the thing. If we don't love ourselves, and we can ask Lofn for that, we can then incorporate that into the bigger relationship of the unconditional love of our partner and our partners and our family. And I think that's where she's available to us today. And we don't know exactly, you know, back in, you know, 800 AD or 600 AD, how they were talking about her. But we have a lot of UPG, and that UPG is going to become the lore of the future, because people are finding her to be a certain way. And she is a fighter, and she is a tough one, and she is a strategist. You know, you cannot not be a strategist if you're trying to help queer people get together in societies as hateful as ours and others.
Yep. Yeah. No, I love that concept. I love that idea. And it is definitely needed because we're taught by capitalism to hate ourselves. We're taught because that's how you sell things. We're taught by our families often that we're horrible people for whatever reason, whether we decide not to have children, whether we're queer, whether we're trans, whatever. And so to have that sort of, no, really, this is the essence of love for love's sake, right? For something you can learn for you, and you can pass it on, and it webs out through the community, right? That is amazingly cool. I'm so glad we have that.
And she's super available. I mean, as I've said, of all the gods and goddesses I have worked with, she is probably the most low-key, easygoing. You know, you do not need, you know, she's not like, give me a blood offering, you know, what? No gold? No, you know, nah, it's amber, sorry. You know, she's like, whatever you can give, and thinking outside of the box for her is a form of offering.
Yeah.
You know, to think outside your box and figure out another way is huge. And she's super present for us, really honestly present. You call on her and you think about her and you do some work with her, and she will be there for you and your relationships.
I have a younger sibling in their 20s who is trans, and they I after your meditation at Troth moot, I told them about that, and because they've been having some problems with their relationships. And they came back a week later and they're like, this is great. I feel so much better. Thank you. So thank you from my younger sibling to you.
I thank Lofn. And, I think, Loki and Lofn talking about the two for the LGBTQ plus community is they work together, but they have different vibes, right?
Yeah.
And I think they complement each other beautifully.
Yeah.
I was just thinking at this point, like people might be wondering why we're not having any kinds of in-depth debates over the identity of Lofn. Is Lofn independent in and of herself, or is Lofn an aspect of another deity? These are the kinds of debates that you might typically see on other heathen channels. But for me, I kind of resolve that debate, and I am aware of it. I am conscious of it. I know that debate exists, but for me, it's whether it is the case that Lofn is indeed an independent or an aspect of something. How you call a god is very much, at least in my mind, how that god is going to show up for you. So if you call a god by a name, the name is powerful, and the god we have to say the name. If we use the name of praise, if we use the name of protection, if we use it, my protector, my my shining one, you'd say that way, that there's a way that we can say I experience that as a completely independent thing, or I experience that as a face of a different face of the same thing. It doesn't really matter to me, I guess.
Yeah, I think that is sort of the angels dancing on a head of a pin sort of thing that to me ultimately doesn't matter because they are who they are. I see them, the way I put it for folk was that I see them as on Frigg's board of directors. You want to talk about them being hypostases, I don't really care. I know what I have experienced. I know from talking to others how they've experienced it. I do see there is a link between these goddesses and Frigg because they are part of her court. But it's like, if you are on the board of directors, you aren't the CEO, right? They're their own person, but you have a designated task, and that's how I see it. For them, they are holy themselves. I don't see them as, but you want to get into that, I guess you could say, but they can be whatever they want to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, well, our monkey brains can only take in so much of what these beings are.
Yes, and I while I find these debates really interesting, I find them interesting. Like I love to hear people's opinions on it. I think that the far more impactful discussion is the one that we've been having on what impact these powers, these beings, these deities have in our lives. And as you mentioned, the even simply the power to say that you are not alone in your grief. You're not alone in your heartbreak. You're not alone, even if you feel like you're worthless, even if you feel like there's just nothing there for you. I was saying this to a guy before, like you're beloved of the gods, right? Someone, you are worth. You have worth, right? It's there, and that can be a really powerful thought that pulls someone through a period of time when they could not love themselves, but they or didn't feel like they were worthy, but they were. The reality is they were, and they are.
It's hard when.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go, Piper.
One of the most toxic things that our culture does actually is to sort of tell us that we have to earn love. We have to do things, or there's the incredibly popular yet evangelical Christian love languages garbage that people love to use all the time. But we're trained that we have to earn it, that we have to do something for it, right? That and the idea is, no, you don't. You have inherent worth just because you are alive, right? You don't have to produce anything. You don't have to do anything. You are a part of the weave of the universe, right? And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like Reverend Maire so much, because he's very good at showing us and telling us that love is there, and it's not to be earned. It's there. You just have it.
Exactly. And it's there, and it's accessible.
It's
and
accessible.
it's accessible to all of us, and it's our, we wall ourselves off, not to blame the victim, but because our society tells us we have to earn. It's like, I'm not good enough. I'm not, no one, and then we reinforce those negative messages. And the more we reinforce it, the more we build the wall. And so it takes time to break that down, guys. I mean, I'm 64, I'm going on 65, and I'm still breaking it down. And I love so many people, and I love my work, and I love helping people. And yet, for myself, it's, it's a lesson to say, hey, you need to take some space. I mean, I need to make space for myself. It's very easy. That's another thing. I'm going to get back to self-love in a very positive way. Literally take that space for yourself. It will make you love others even more deeply and make your relationships better.
Yeah.
And I like it, like the love that we have by default is either love from within us or from the gods, this inherent love. Important to note, you cannot make someone else love you. You can't.
Yeah, please don't. Please don't do that.
No, unless you listen for the next 10 minutes, we're going to give you all the latest love spells that we have.
Not for me, or not.
Me neither. No.
Oh man. Well, wait.
No.
I wanted to get on this topic because this isn't really. It's a very popular search item.
Oh boy, is it ever!
Looking for love spells, and I think to myself, like, how do I make someone love me? How do I? And my thought is, on that, why would you want that kind of love where it is forced on a person?
Okay, yeah,
coerced. Well, here's what I always come back to. One of my favorite plays, one of the favorite things I've read or seen performed was A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen. I don't know if you. It was immensely impactful on me. It hit me exactly the right time in my life, where I was really into like alpha male stuff. I read this thing, and I didn't get it at first, and I ended up having to like reread it a few times till I understood, like, wait a minute, it's almost like saying society is this magic coercive spell that Nora, all of a sudden, this one day the spell is broken, and she sees that she's a doll in a doll's house, and that husband, this person that she's been told she's supposed to love, she doesn't actually know if she loves him or not. And I remember my first reading of this was like, I felt so bad for the husband because, like, oh, your wife's leaving you and you don't know why. And then I thought, wait, it's even worse because you've been living with someone who's been forced to love you or who didn't know whether or not they did, and raised children with you and had no idea whether or not they actually love you, and were just felt that they were coerced by this magic spell society casts, patriarchy, to forced into this relationship to be dependent on you for their very survival. And when that spell was broken, they said, I don't know who I am, and I don't know if I love you. So would someone really want to live in a doll's house with a doll? I don't know. That's what I always relate it to. It's just a love spell. Patriarchy is almost like a love spell, isn't it?
I think that love spells. Okay, there are a lot of them out there. Come hither spells, all sorts of spells. And as a witch, I have seen a lot of stuff, but of course, I also think it's one of the things that in my other tradition that I have very much embraced is we don't, that's baneful magic. To go out and inflict your will on someone without their consent is never a good thing. And it's just like, if again, let's first of all put the elbow grease in, put the work in. So it's like someone who says, I want to, and I do these all the time. Let's say I want to do a prosperity thing. And I'm like, yes, I'm happy to do a prosperity jar. I did one at Troth last year. But if that's all you do and you sit back and you're like, wait, there's nothing coming in, you have to put work in, I'm calling this in, I'm calling on the seen and unseen to help me manifest, but then I got to put my work into this. If I don't go look for jobs and I sit there and go, no jobs, I did this prosperity, then I'm not doing my part of the bargain. And it's the same with relationships. We can't make someone love us. We might be able to boost the signal though by actually going out there and let's see how it goes. Let's invite them out. That's scary step of actually communicating.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if it doesn't go well, that's it. Then you just gotta go back and figure something else out. They may not be the one, or you maybe need to reassess the way you're going about it and what's going on in you. Why do you want this person? Asking all those hard questions.
Yeah, or praying to the God, saying instead of saying make this person love me, like what do I have to do? I feel this. I feel that I really want to connect with this person. What do I do? Like what
How do I
do?
Yeah,
How
there's
do I
ways.
connect with this person, right? Or how do I reconnect with this person?
Yeah.
Rather than, because I've seen it from a heathen perspective too, not just love spells, but like begging the gods to change someone's mind. Like, get my girlfriend back for me, Odin, and I shall give you this pig. Like,
he wouldn't be the one.
or no, I've even seen it, like read it. Like, what do I have to Odin? What do I have to give to Freya to get my girlfriend back?
Right.
Right.
I've answered that question on Reddit a couple times actually, and it's always don't. But
yeah, exactly.
I agree with because it is coercive, it is without someone's consent, and also you could save a lot of time and trouble just by asking them out to coffee and having a conversation, right? I mean,
and they'll either say yes or no.
Right, exactly. Why go
around from the gods through
Piper, where you can just talk to the person?
And lots of people are going through the online thing, and lots of people are meeting. Like you get some duds and you get some thumbs up and some met. And like this, I know I have a son who met his current girlfriend through using a dating app.
Cool.
Hey, it worked. Yeah. So there's methods out there, and honestly, there is a case where I would say you could call on, let's say now, the GNA right now, the messenger, and say, hey, I'm going to go onto this dating app. I'm putting myself out there. Help me to find the right connections, the ones that might be right for me. I think that is not baneful magic. Right. I'm not trying to attract it. I'm just saying, help me find the people I need to find. And that
inspire
is okay.
Inspire me with the wisdom to see who I need to see, right?
Yeah, and send the juices through the Manny Mo and Jack of the whatever called the Manny Mo and Jack of whoever you're sending down from up there. Have them go in through the ether and get to the connections I need.
Right.
Not even knowing what they are.
Yeah.
Love that.
Just for fun.
All right, guys. Thank you guys both so much for all the wonderful advice and counsel that you guys have provided. I think this is going to be so useful for people. I hope that our audience watching live has benefited greatly from it. And, this recording is available for, in perpetuity. So thank you, Piper. Thank you, Reverend, for also being here tonight. And if you guys had any final parting words for people, a little nugget of advice, anything else anything else I can squeeze out of you about this topic.
Have some fun with your honeys. That's all I can say. Enjoy them. Happy Valentine's Day for those of you who celebrate. Coming
Yeah.
up.
Happy Valentine's Day for those of you who celebrate. And, building relationship should be a loving, joyful thing. If it's not, maybe think about what you're asking for, right?
Right.
Love
Right.
it.
I think
And
so.
thank you, Ben Wagner, for your approval of my pun. I make these for you, buddy. So it's with that. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to our guests for Althing Considered. My name is Ben Kowalski-Grech, and this has been a production of the Troth. Thank you all so much. Good night.
Thank you.